Alright, so I've got another NPC upgrade build for you today, and we're finally looking at V4 Rusty's Steel Haze AC. Now, this build, along with the Ortus version, has been requested several times, and it's been something I've been meaning to get around to, but I was putting it off because I was originally planning to do these two builds as a single video, just one package, right? And I realized as I was getting started on that, it was just going to be a really long video, and I don't really want to do that, right? So splitting them into two separate videos to keep them, a bit more bite-sized, a bit more manageable. And so if you are more interested in the Ortus version, that video will be out in a couple days. Now moving on, Steel Haze itself. What are the problems with this build? Honestly, not much. It's a pretty solid build all around. It's not the best build in the world, but it's a pretty good build. The Nocta Her frame parts are pretty good. Sampu pistols, pretty good. The laser spinners, pretty good. The back units, I'm not a big fan of, having a weapon switch personally for the most part, unless it's like a really specific purpose. But just having a weapon switch for a melee is generally not something I'm a fan of. I like having a more passive weapon to support the melee weapon, but the Rensetsu RF is a pretty good weapon all around, and of course, the plasma missile is decent. So what have I done? Well, I've left the two primary hand weapons alone. Of course, the Sampu, the laser spinner, didn't see the need to change it. Now for the back units on the other hand, when I switched the plasma missile from the 3-cell front firing plasma missile to the vertical 5-cell plasma missile, right? Actually someone pointed out in a previous video, which I thought was a really good point, is that the NPCs aren't the smartest, and if you get on vertical missiles, a lot of times they'll just kind of throw them into the ceiling. Now, thankfully for Rusty, I haven't seen that to be too big of a problem, because I did, go to Rusty's arena and kind of get a good feel of how Rusty plays. And I don't think it'll be a problem in Rusty's case, so I did decide to go for the vertical plasma missile for that. Otherwise, I would have just given him the bigger plasma missiles. I can't even remember if he had the big ones to begin with, but I'm pretty sure he only had the 3 cells. Otherwise, I'd give him the 6 cells, right? But the vertical plasmas, and I decided to switch out the Rensetsu RF for the Huxley, because it's a more passive weapon, and honestly, it's a better weapon in general. The Huxley is, funnily enough, the actual best assault rifle, because you could say the Rensetsu is the best assault rifle, but the Huxley's really the best assault rifle, right? So I decided to split it out for kind of the main purpose of just leaning harder into the build's identity as a close range, high speed, burst damage build. You build impact, you get a stagger, you do a bunch of damage with the laser spinner, right? That's kind of the build's identity and goal. So I wanted to lean into that harder. The Huxley does a lot of impact damage, and while you've got an impact going, it actually works with the laser spinner because it keeps firing, right? And it actually adds a lot of extra damage to your stagger combo. You do a lot of damage in a single stagger with both the laser spinner and the Huxley going. It really caught me by surprise just how much extra damage it added. But I think it's a really good switch, and it makes the build play a lot better in my opinion. Not having to switch to Rensetsu and kind of having to juggle the laser spinner and the Rensetsu feels a lot better in my opinion. I don't really like doing weapon switches, except for builds with like a very specific purpose for doing so, right? Like a quad bazooka build or something, right? Or, something like that. That's the only time I really like doing weapon switches. So it is I would say it's a bit of a personal bias there, but it is what it is. Now let's go ahead and move on and get into the details. As always, starting with the weapons, I have left the right and left arm units alone, the Sampu and the laser spinner. I've left these as they are. They're pretty solid weapons, and I didn't feel a need to change them. And moving on to the back units, on the other hand, I switched out his original 3-cell forward-firing plasma missile launcher for the 5-cell vertical plasma missile. I've talked about it before, but I find that the vertical plasma launcher is just far more consistent than either of the horizontals. And generally, I would say I find this one to be more consistent than this one also as well. One thing to actually note, if you're kind of confused about the attack power on the plasma missiles, it is just 760 damage split between all the missiles that are fired. So they actually all do the same amount of total damage. Kind of just the way they fire, and especially for these two, the amount of multi-lock you get. So, but personally, again, I just find that the verticals are way more consistent than the forward-firing ones for the plasma missile, right? Now, moving on to the left arm back unit, I switched to his original Rensetsu RF rifle for the Huxley Bullet Orbit, right? I mean, this is just a general upgrade. This is just a better weapon in my opinion. Also a really passive weapon, because obviously you just turn on the Huxley and it just fires. And this lets you do a couple of things that the build can't normally do, like doing melee dashing, with the laser spinner as sort of a kind of threat to fake out your opponent and stuff like that, right? To bait out movement and stuff. Or even just if you see your opponent's like out of energy, just commit to it anyways, right? It's just a nice quality of life upgrade in my opinion, as well as just being a straight damage and impact upgrade. Because like I mentioned in the intro, if you get a stagger, this thing just keeps firing. And your laser spinner will lock them in place for pretty much the full combo. Well, they don't, sometimes they drop out of it. The laser spinner and like the chainsaw are, these multi-hit weapons can be a little inconsistent sometimes. But as long as they're locked into the combo, obviously the Huxley's just going to keep doing damage to them. And it will add a surprisingly large amount of extra damage, right? And again, it's just passive, and it's just way better at dealing impact than the Rensetsu RF, in my opinion. And the really only downside to using the Huxley over the Rensetsu, at least in my opinion, is going to be the ammo, right? Because the Huxley just really burns through ammo very, very quickly. If you're not paying attention, you run out of ammo very, very fast, right? It can also overheat quite quickly, and the cooldown time is pretty long. Be aware that you can actually, I guess, undeploy the Huxley before it overheats, and it'll cool much faster, right? Keep that in mind. Try not to let it overheat, and generally, it's just a far, far superior weapon to the Rensetsu. And it just makes the build feel a lot better to play. Now, moving on into the frame parts. I've only made one change here, and of course, it's the VP-46D arm with the original Nocturne arms. The purpose here is literally just the extra melee specialization. You just don't really need this much firearm specialization on the build. Between having a good FCS and just being a close range build, you just don't need this much firearm spec. Recoil control, it's also better on this build, or on these arms, not that it really matters. The Sampo doesn't really have enough recoil to matter here, but the extra melee specialization gives you a nice extra chunk of damage on the laser spinner. And considering that it is primarily just a direct hit damage dealer, that extra damage really helps a lot, and it hits a lot harder, right? And that's it. That's it. I know I've used these arms a lot in recent videos, but these arms really just are that good. They're lightweight. They've got decent defensive stats for their weight. Got good firearm spec and good melee spec. Any lightweight build that wants to use both melee and guns, this is just a really good weapon. This is just really good arms, right? Just really, really good arms. And that's really all there is to say about the frame. I didn't change anything else. These are all decent heads. Like, Nocturne head's got pretty good attitude stability for his weight. Nocturne core is, really, really fast core. Got, not the worst generator stats, I guess. Not amazing, but it's a really lightweight, really fast core. And the legs are also really lightweight. And they have really good jump stats. And, they're just good parts, right? There's just not much to complain about with these parts. And that's all there is to say about the frames. Move on into the internals. Now, I've only made one change here again. Let me start with the boosters, though. So, originally has the Alulu boosters on, and these are basically perfect for this, right? There isn't any reason to switch this out. Really, lightweight, high-speed boosters with good quick boost stats, and also it's got good melee thrust stats and good assault boost stats. The energy consumption of these boosters aren't the best. They do tend to be really heavy on energy consumption, but you have a pretty solid ender with a decent energy bar and pretty good energy recharge rate to counter that, right? Now for the FCS, I switched his original, I believe it's this one? I think it was this one originally. I switched this FCS out for the Oculus FCS. Now, since I've gotten rid of the Rensetsu RF, no need for medium range assist on this build anymore. The Sampus are basically only good in close range, right? So I went for the Oculus just for that max close range assist. Be as accurate as possible. Now, you might be worried about the missile lock correction stat, but don't worry about it. The vertical plasmas or the plasmas in general, have a really low lock-on time. So although the lock-on time does get a little bit worse, you don't really notice it, and it's not enough to make it any worse, right? And the PO5 didn't exactly have crazy good stats to begin with, so it's not that big of a loss, right? But instead, it makes you kind of a nice trade-off for the arms. That lower firearm specialization just doesn't matter at all, right? And then finally for the generator, the Hokushi, this is what he has on originally. This is a pretty solid, lightweight, high energy output generator with a pretty decent energy capacity and, relatively decent energy charge stats. And it does allow you to have a decent capacity and a decent supply efficiency on a pretty much budget part, right? It's a pretty solid generator around. It's something I've been using more and more often recently, especially on lightweight builds. that aren't using any energy weapons, right? And yeah, he originally has assault armor on. I didn't change it, of course, no reason to. And yeah, that's all there is to say about the build. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one, which, reminder, is going to be Steel Haze Ortis. And also, stick around for some more gameplay footage.
Heavy mobile cannon. I wouldn't recommend taking it head on. It won't be able to keep up with Steel Haze. I'll distract it while you hit its blind spot. That's the stuff. Walter knows how to pick 'em. Watch out. It's coming. This is V4. Understood. Raymond, I just got an update from Snail at command. We've got enemy reinforcements incoming. If I don't intercept them, we're both toast. I hate to leave you like this, but you'll have to finish without me. He's gone. So much for our decoy.
Left shoulder ammunition at 50%.
Confirmed. Juggernaut destroyed. Operation Wall Climber is a success. That pilot, Rusty, it seems he knew who you really are. It won't matter. I've taken that contingency into account.
Main system activating combat mode.
Commence mission. Make your way down to the next depth.
Something's jamming the radar. It must be interference from the active coral. Rely on your eyes and ears.
Is that...
Coral response from inside the creature. Watch out!
reading pods for the mealworms. Looks like they're out of commission now.
Raven, I'm reading something behind us, and it's getting closer.
Go deal with a mercenary who went in alone, they said. Figures. Seems both of us are too dangerous to keep around. And the higher-ups wouldn't miss an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. Hate to say it, but Rubicon still needs me. So, buddy, who needs you?
AC Steel Haze.
I don't want to dance to their tune, but this time, I don't have any other choice. I'm coming, buddy. I set you both up. 621, make it through this alive. That's your job. Never failed to impress. But this isn't over yet. Buddy. There's no graver threat than power without purpose.
We've lost all signs of Steel Haze.